If someone walked up to you on the street and told you that they're a god, would you believe them? Probably not. But suppose you were open-minded about it and asked them to prove it. What would you ask them to do to prove to you that they're a god? How would you know? First of all, how do you eliminate trickery? If you asked them to do something you'd consider magical, like turning water into wine, say, and they did it, how do you know it isn't an alien with a molecular changing ray, or a teleporter or something? You see them do this kind of stuff on Star Trek all the time with the holodeck or with food replicators. What makes you think you're not seeing some advanced technology in the hands of a trickster? Or maybe it is magic, but you found yourself a wizard, not a god. How could you tell? Second, by what criteria do you define a god? Do they have to be immortal? If you look at the mythologies of non-Abrahamic faiths, like the Greek, Egyptian, or Norse, gods seem to go around killing each other. A lot. Maybe a mortal can't do them in, but gods can clearly die. Do they have to be all-powerful? Again, looking at non-Abrahamic gods, many of them control things like the seasons, or love, or the sun. Gods don't have to be all-powerful. Do they have to seem human? Not even the Abrahamic God is always human-shaped. That's no requirement. In fact, if you look it up in the dictionary, the definition of a god is very vague. It says stuff like supreme being, presides over worldly affairs, creates the universe, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really give us any identifying attributes. There is nothing about appearance, there is nothing about personality beyond the most vague and broad strokes, there is nothing about anything. In fact, the only way we know anything at all about any gods is from the people who have claimed that they exist, not from actually studying a god. Suppose for a moment that there really is a god, but it's not the one described by human religions, and suppose that god revealed itself to you. How would you know it was true? By what criteria would you judge? If it can do magic, maybe it's a wizard and not a god. If it's immortal, maybe it's magical and can't die, but does that make it a god? If it created the universe, maybe it's some interdimensional alien being and not a god. If there were scriptures said to be handed down to primitive humans, it might just be some guy who wrote fiction. If it happens to be all of these things, does that make it a god? How many different magical attributes must it have before we can call it a god? Where is that dividing line? The idea behind gods is so nebulous, so vague, so unformed, that it's essentially useless in determining whether a god exists at all. If we're not looking at specific scriptures, at dogma, and using that as a reference to determine whether or not we've found a god, we're basically just shooting blind. For some of us, this is what makes us atheists. None of the gods that people have described in detail have ever shown up, ever been provable. And looking for some generalized deity that fits a vague description which, frankly, reads like a fairy tale or a fantasy novel is basically pointless since we don't know what we're even looking for, really. So I ask again, what is a god? Would you know one if you saw one? How? By what reason can you believe such a creature even exists if you can't describe it in any detail? It seems pretty silly, to be honest, this concept of a deity, a flight of fancy that has taken root in humanity's cultural zeitgeist, not through actual existence, but rather just through longevity. Please, don't accept the idea without checking its merits first. Instead, think. Please take the time to rate this video. And hey, if you dig what I do, subscribe. You might also enjoy my webcomic, The Adventures of Kinneara Baxter. You'll find a link in the info bar. Every time you rate, an angel loses its wings.